train screamed its way west, a ribbon of iron thunder cutting through dry country, trailing smoke like a funeral veil. When it was gone, only dust remained dust, and a woman in white standing alone on the cracked platform, staring down the horizon as if it might apologize. Her dress was yellowed at the hem, a bit too tight at the seams, and her gloved hands clutched a suitcase that looked borrowed from a better life. She didn't cry. That was the strange part. No tears, just the stillness of someone who had stood too long and didn't know where to go next. Across the station yard beside a hitched roan gelding, a man with gray in his beard watched her. Hat tilted, low boots worn raw. He chewed tobacco like it was keeping him grounded. Rhett Langford hadn't planned to ride into town today, but the dry wind carried a smell of change, and his horse had led him here as if it knew something he didn't. The woman glanced around once, searching. Nothing. No buggy. No groom. Just her, the heat, and the sound of a sign creaking above the station. Rhett spat into the dust. He could ride off. Hell, he should. Whatever mess she was in, it wasn't his to fix. But as he stepped into the saddle, the woman sat down on her suitcase and rested her head in her hands, not crying, just folding in on herself like paper in the rain. Rhett didn't ride away. Not yet. Something about the way she sat, like she'd practiced vanishing, tightened something in his chest he thought long gone. Rhett Langford's ranch sat on the edge of nowhere, where the soil cracked and the well whispered empty secrets. Once it had thrived, fat cattle, golden wheat, laughter echoing from the porch. That was before the fever took Emily and the baby, before the barn roof collapsed under a late snow, and before the river that fed his land shifted its course like it got bored and wandered off. Now the place clung to life the way an old man clings to a war story, out of pride, not hope. He didn't keep much inside the house anymore. A cracked rocking chair, a cupboard with 3 mismatched cups, a pistol beneath the floorboard wrapped in his wife's shawl. But the gravestone in the backfield never moved, and every time Rhett passed it, he tipped his hat like a man who'd failed someone and knew it. The only letter he ever wrote to Emily sat folded in a coffee tin behind the stove. He'd tried a dozen times to finish it, but the words turned brittle in his mouth, and so it remained unfinished, a confession without courage. He woke before sunup every day, fed the chickens that didn't lay, checked the fence that didn't hold. No one came by. He liked it that way. When you stop expecting company, the silence stops hurting. But sometimes in the dark before dawn, he'd imagine a soft footstep on the porch, a baby's cry, a shadow moving in the corner, and the ache would come roaring back sharp and sudden as a branding iron. That morning, after seeing the woman at the station, he brought his horse to a stop at the gate and didn't dismount right away. She hadn't followed him. He hadn't offered, but she stayed in his mind like a splinter. Her age showed in her eyes more than her face, 40, maybe more. But her back was straight, her presence proud, even when the train left her like trash someone forgot to collect. Rhett knew what it felt like to be forgotten. He didn't need trouble. He needed Rain, a working well, and about $1,000 he didn't have. But what he had was a roof that didn't yet leak stew enough for 2, and a voice in his gut he hadn't heard in years whispering, "Just ask if she's all right." That was all. Just ask, nothing more. But he didn't ride back. Not that day. He mucked the stall-boiled coffee, watched the wind slide across the empty fields like a widow brushing dust from her skirts. As night fell, he sat on the porch, the letter to Emily in his lap, still unsigned. He lit a cigarette, took one drag, and snuffed it out. The woman was probably gone by now, taken in by someone else or headed back east. Still, as Rhett rocked slowly in the chair, he glanced toward the road more than once. Just in case. The next morning, Rhett rode into town again, pretending it was for nails or feed or anything else that might justify the pull in his chest. The station was quieter now. No train, no crowd. Just the whistle post creaking in the breeze and that same suitcase sitting upright beside the bench like a loyal dog. And there she was, Irene Delaney, same dress, though now it was smudged with dust and a single tear along the side seam right above the hip. She'd pinned her hair up again tighter this time and sat stiffly on the bench like a woman guarding her last coin. "You waiting on someone?" Rhett asked, voice dry as gravel. She didn't flinch. Not anymore. He nodded, shifted his weight in the saddle. Town's not much for shelter, I noticed. She looked up at him then. Her eyes were the color of iron cooled too fast, brittle, steely, but with a sadness that softened their edge. You offering, Rhett nearly said no. He hadn't meant to ask, hadn't meant to speak even. But his gut spoke again, louder this time. I got a bunkhouse with 4 empty beds and no one to fill them. If you don't mind dust and bad coffee. She stood, brushed her skirt, picked up the suitcase like it weighed more than it looked. Then I accept. He offered a hand. She didn't take it. She climbed up behind him without a word, arms lightly touching his back, suitcase balanced in her lap. They didn't speak on the ride back. Her silence wasn't fragile, it was chosen. He respected that. At the ranch, she stepped down and looked around like a woman measuring consequences. You live alone 3 years now. She nodded slowly. Irene Delaney. Rhett Langford. Inside, he showed her the washroom and pointed toward the bunkhouse. There's fresh water in the pump. Not warm, but it works. She turned to him in the doorway. He said I was too old, she said, voice calm, almost polite. Who the man I was supposed to marry? Her fingers tightened on the handle of the suitcase. We wrote for months. He asked me to come. I sold everything I had in New York. Got on that train thinking I'd be a wife. Rhett said nothing. She smiled without joy. When the train stopped, he took one look at me and said, "You're not the girl in the picture." Then he got back on. Rhett cleared his throat, shifted in his boots. You can stay as long as you like. Irene nodded, stepped inside and closed the door gently. That night, Rhett made stew with the last of the beans. He set 2 bowls out on the porch. She joined him after sundown, her hair loose now, sleeves rolled, hands washed clean. They ate in silence, watching the wind dance across the empty fields. Afterward, she handed him a small folded piece of paper. My reference letter, she said. For employment. In case you need proof I'm not trouble. He took it, didn't open it. I figure anyone left at a train station in a wedding dress has had enough proof thrown at her. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away. The sky was bruising with stars when they finally spoke again. You think the land's cursed? She asked. Rhett stared out into the dark. No. Just lonely. Irene nodded. Then we have something in common. The next morning brought wind and the sound of hooves far off, too steady for cattle. Rhett stood on the porch with a mug of weak coffee, eyes narrowed against the light. Irene joined him a moment later, her sleeves rolled again, hair tied back with a ribbon that looked like it had once been blue. She sipped from her own mug, half coffee, half hot water, and nodded toward the East Ridge. You expecting someone? She asked. No, Rhett said, and that's what worries me. By mid-morning, the rider appeared. A thin man in a dust-colored coat, clean-shaven spectacles glinting under a wide-brimmed hat. He didn't bother with pleasantries, just handed over an envelope marked with a wax seal, a black elm tree scorched at the base. Black Elm Holdings. Rhett recognized the name. Most men in 3 counties did. A syndicate that called itself a company led by investors and ex-railroad men buying up land like it was poker chips. If you didn't sell, they made life hard. If you still didn't sell, men like Morgan Bale paid you a visit. The letter inside was formal, its language tight as barbed wire. Notice of seizure intent. The company claimed his land bordered future rail development. Legal jargon masks the real message: we're taking it. Either agree or get swept aside. Rhett crumpled the paper, tossed it in the stove without a word. I know that seal, Irene said, watching the flames take it. I used to write under it. Rhett looked at her sharply. I worked in their finance office, New York division, did their ledgers. I kept quiet because I was tired of that life, tired of carrying their secrets. That's why I left. You think they followed you here? She shook her head. Not yet. But they will. That letter wasn't coincidence. They know I'm here. Or suspect it. How I may have taken something when I left. Something they'd rather stay buried. Rhett leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. So you're not just a jilted bride? No, Irene said quietly. I'm a loose end. That night they didn't speak much. Irene cleaned the kitchen like she'd always lived there. Rhett oiled the rifle he hadn't touched in months. The wind picked up just after sundown, and with it came the scent of firebrush burning 2 ridges south. By dawn, the barn door had been sliced open. The feed bags were slashed, and 1 calf lay dead with its tongue cut out. A warning, clean, quick, surgical. "Come again," Irene said, kneeling by the calf. Rhett nodded. "Yeah, they always do." "I should go." "No," he said. "You stay. You're not the one who ran from them." She stood slowly. "I wasn't running. I was escaping." He met her eyes. "Then maybe we both are." That afternoon the parson came in a wagon with tools and a bent back. Rhett called him over. They spoke quietly while Irene watched from the porch. An hour later they were married beneath a dying cottonwood tree. No guests, no rings, just 2 people standing still while the wind pulled at their clothes, trying to see what they were made of. "Why now?" she asked afterward. "Because I needed a reason to fight," Rhett said. "And you needed a place to stand." The marriage wasn't about love, not yet. It was about defiance, about planting feet into dry earth and saying, "I won't be moved." It was about looking at the people who threw you away and answering back with steel in your eyes. That night she slept in the main house. Not in his bed, not yet, but under the same roof. A quiet acknowledgement of something shared. As Rhett turned the lamp low, Irene pulled something from her suitcase, a journal, leather-bound pages marked with codes and names. She handed it to him. "What is it? Their accounts. The ones they thought I deleted. It's not enough to stop them, but it's enough to hurt them. If we make it that far." Rhett thumbed through it, whistled low. "You kept it all." "Memory is a weapon," she said, "and I don't intend to forget." That night, Rhett slept with the rifle beside him and the door unlocked. He wasn't hiding anymore. Neither was she. The fire started just after midnight. A distant crackle at first, like someone walking through dry leaves. Rhett's eyes snapped open before the smell hit acrid, sharp barnwood burning. He was out of bed in seconds, boots thudding on the floorboards. By the time he burst through the front door, the night sky behind the barn pulsed orange, alive with flame. "Irene," he shouted. She met him outside, already pulling on her coat, journal clutched under her arm. Her hair was loose, face pale in the glow. Together they sprinted to the barn, but the roof was already collapsing, sparks leaping like devils into the wind. "No point," Rhett said, choking on smoke. Too far gone. The cattle had scattered. He could hear their cries in the dark. Somewhere near the paddock, a young steer wailed, pinned under a fallen beam. Rhett started toward it, but Irene grabbed his arm. "Listen," she whispered. "Hoofbeats. More than one. Not fleeing, approaching. Slow, deliberate, like men unafraid of being seen." Rhett dropped to one knee, rifle raised toward the ridge. Shapes emerged from the darkness, 3 riders, all black coats and wide-brimmed hats like shadows cut from coal. The one in front dismounted first. Tall, lean, his face long and horse-like, with a silver tooth that caught the firelight when he smiled. Morgan Bale. Rhett knew him by reputation, a fixer, a cleaner, the kind of man who made hard problems disappear without noise. Langford Bale called voice casual as Sunday rain. "Got ourselves a dispute over property, thought we'd come talk it out." "Don't look like talking," Rhett said. "Sometimes fire speaks better than words." The other 2 dismounted behind him, one short with a limp, the other younger, jittery. All carried rifles, all too relaxed. They didn't expect a fight. "You got 10 seconds to leave my land," Rhett said. Bale chuckled. "This ain't your land, not anymore. Black Elm's got papers, you got, what, a couple burnt beams and a ghost for a wife that did it." Rhett fired. The shot clipped the young one's shoulder, sent him tumbling back with a scream. The other 2 ducked behind fence posts, firing wild into the night. "Get inside," Rhett shouted to Irene. But she didn't run. She knelt by the trough-splashed water over a rag and tossed it to Rhett. "Cover your face," she said. "You'll need your breath." The firefight wasn't elegant. It was loud, dirty, full of blind shots and shouted threats. Rhett ducked behind the plow-counted rounds and waited for Bale to get cocky. He did. "Don't be stupid," Rhett, Bale called. "You think this woman's worth your land, your life?" Rhett stood up slowly, rifle steady. You tried to buy my silence. Then you tried to burn it. I'm done running. Bale moved like a snake, fast and low. His shot grazed Rhett's arm, hot sharp. Rhett dropped, rolled behind the trough. The water inside was red now, blood from the steer, maybe his own. He reached into the filth and pulled out a broken iron rod used for hitching. As Bale advanced, Rhett lunged. The iron caught him just below the ribs, and Bale crumpled with a grunt, firing one last shot that shattered the porch rail. The one with the limp ran. The young one crawled. Only Bale lay still. Rhett stood over him, chest heaving, blood dripping from his sleeve. Should have stayed a banker, he muttered. Irene came up beside him, face white but calm. They'll send more. I know. What now? He looked toward the wreckage of the barn, flames dying to embers. Now we make them bleed. The next day, Rhett rode to town. Arm-wrapped jaw, set eyes, burning with purpose. He carried Irene's journal and walked straight into the sheriff's office. Got something you'll want to see, said. The sheriff, a man named Carter Riles, was no stranger to Black Elm's reach. But even he paled when he saw the names, the bribes, the forged deeds. This could hang them, he whispered. Then hang them, Rhett said. By sundown, the telegram wires were humming, warrants filed. The story spread fast. Black Elm Holdings caught cooking their books, laundering bribes through dead ranchers and vanished miners. But it wasn't over. That night, Rhett and Irene sat on the porch, sipping warm coffee as the wind blew over scorched fields. You sure about this? He asked. She nodded. They'll come. But now the whole territory's watching. He studied her face, the lines of fatigue, the quiet fire. I married you to make a stand. I didn't expect to want to stay married. Irene looked at him for a long moment. Then don't leave. She took his hand. Not soft, not dramatic. Just her fingers against his, steady and certain. And for the first time in years, Rhett Langford didn't feel like the last man standing. He felt like part of something again. Something worth fighting for. The war wasn't over, but the battle had been theirs. And from the ashes of the barn, something stronger had begun to grow. 2 days after the fire, the telegram came. Irene read it twice before handing it to Rhett. The message was unsigned, but the words were clear. You think you're safe, Mrs. Langford. We taught you the numbers. We know how many days you have left. Rhett read it slowly, lips tightening. They're not finished. No, Irene said. They never are. She walked to the edge of the porch and stared toward the smoking ruins of the barn, arms folded across her chest. I thought I could disappear out here. Start over. I didn't mean to pull you into this. Rhett leaned on the post beside her. You didn't pull me. I stepped in. Irene turned to him. You remember the man who left me at the station, Franklin Mallory, vaguely. He wasn't a suitor. He was a handler. His job was to keep me from talking. The engagement was a cover to get me away from the ledgers without making a fuss. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the tremor underneath. I knew too much. I took that journal as insurance. I thought, maybe if I ran far enough, changed my name, I could make them forget me. Rhett stared at her. So the whole marriage wasn't the plan, she said. I was supposed to pass through, maybe hide in a boarding house until I could get to California. But then the train stopped and you looked at me like I wasn't broken. And she broke fists clenched at her sides. I didn't mean for any of this. Rhett's jaw worked silently for a moment. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were kind, she whispered. And I didn't want your kindness to sour. He turned away, walking down the steps past the blackened earth where the barn once stood. The journal sat on the kitchen table, its pages now copied and sent to a federal marshal in Dodge. The information would bring heat on Black Elm, but heat had a price. Fire licked back at whoever lit it. Behind him, Irene spoke again. They'll come in daylight next time. Legal men, court orders, maybe even wearing stars. Black Elm's not just thugs, they're investors, lawyers, a judge or two. You'll lose everything if you stand by me. Rhett turned, eyes shadowed by the brim of his hat. I already lost everything once, and this time you might lose your life. He stepped closer, looking her dead in the eye. Then at least it's for something that matters. That night a rider came just after sundown. Not a gunman, but a courier. He handed over another envelope, this one crisp and formal. Irene opened it with stiff fingers. Inside was a marriage annulment filed under her old name, Anna Mallory, signed and stamped by a judge in Abilene. "They're erasing me," she murmured, as if I never existed. Rhett looked at the paper. "You want me to sign it?" "No." She tore it in half then again, "But I wanted you to know who I was, before I was Irene." He nodded slowly. "And now I'm, if you'll still have me." He didn't answer right away. He walked into the house, returned with the old letter he'd kept for years. He handed it to her. "I wrote this to Emily after she died," he said. "Tried to tell her I was sorry for letting her carry all the hope alone. I never sent it because I didn't know how to say goodbye." Irene unfolded the yellowed paper. His handwriting was rough, uneven, a man unused to pouring himself out. "I think maybe I wasn't just writing to her," he said. "I think I was writing to someone who'd remind me how to live again." They sat on the porch steps until the stars took over the sky. Irene folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it between her palms like a prayer. "Then we don't run anymore," she said. "We stand." Rhett took her hand. Together. The wind rustled through the blackened grass, carrying with it the scent of ash and the faintest hint of rain. Behind them, the night creaked. Ahead of them, reckoning rode on paper and boots, on words scribbled in secret, and on the courage it took to say, "I am not afraid of the truth anymore." Tomorrow would bring lawyers, deputies, maybe worse. But tonight they were still married. Tonight the lie had become real. The morning the courtmen came, the sky held a silver sheen, the kind that made every sound sharper, every shape more final. 3 riders approached down the east road, starched shirts, ironed vests, one wearing a deputy badge that gleamed like a warning. The man in the lead was thin and sharp, all bones and papers. His name was Wesley Crane, a legal agent for Black Elm, though he carried the air of someone who thought himself above the dirt he rode on. Rhett and Irene stood side by side on the porch, their clothes, clean boots planted. The journal lay in full view on the table behind them, open to a page listing Black Elm's shell companies and the dates of illegal land seizures. Crane dismounted, offered no greeting. "Mr. Langford, Mrs. Langford," he said, voice clipped. "You've been served. The property is now under injunction. You'll need to vacate within 5 days." Rhett didn't flinch. "You might want to read the bottom of page 34, he said. Crane glanced back at his deputy. The man stepped forward, opened the journal. His eyes widened. "This is internal, this is federal." Rhett crossed his arms. "Already on its way to Dodge. You take this land, that becomes obstruction. You force us off it, that's conspiracy." Crane's mouth twisted. "You think you can win this? I don't need to win," Rhett said. "I just need the truth to outlive you." Crane stared at him, then at Irene. Something in her gaze made him step back, not fear, not even defiance, but calm finality. The look of a woman who had already lost everything and was no longer afraid to lose again. He turned on his heel. "You'll hear from us again. Sooner the better," Irene called after him. By dusk, the riders were gone. But they'd be back. Maybe not as lawyers next time. Maybe with torches again, or ropes, or court orders sharpened like blades. Still, Rhett didn't board the windows. He let the doors stay open, let the wind move through the house like a guest that had finally been welcomed. Later that night, Irene sat at the table with the journal closed and a single sheet of paper before her. She smoothed it with her palm, dipped the pen, and began writing. The letter was not to Black Elm, not to the sheriff or the court. It was addressed to Emily Langford. She wrote as a woman who had married a man with ghosts, who had come into a house where grief slept in every room. She wrote not to replace a memory, but to add to it. To tell Emily that Rhett had loved her and still did, and that in the hollow space she left behind, something new had taken root. In the morning they walked together to the edge of the ridge where the grave stood. Rhett placed the letter beside the stone, wrapped in oilcloth. Not to be buried. Just left where the wind could read it. And when they turned to go, Irene reached down and etched one more name beneath Emily's on the marker, not as a replacement, not as a theft, but as a joining. Delaney, 2 names, 1 story. As they walked back to the house, a hawk circled above, slicing through the morning sky like a vow unbroken. Sometimes redemption doesn't arrive in thunder. It arrives in quiet, in letters finally sent, in the hands of those who choose to stay. A worn journal, a fresh name on stone, and the wind always listening. If you felt something stir in your heart, watch our next story, and don't forget to subscribe for more echoes from the West.